Okay, today we're going to look at decimal multiplication. We are going to model decimal multiplication. So we're going to be doing some diagrams with our multiplication today. This is lesson 4.6. Investigate. The distance from Charlene's house to her school is 8/10 mile. Charlene rides her bike 7/10 of the distance and walks the rest of the way. How far does Charlene ride her bike to school? Now, I do want to point out something I noticed yesterday, that they start saying 7/10 in words in some of your story problems, so be sure that you're reading carefully. Okay, you can use a decimal square to multiply decimals. Multiply 7/10 times 8/10. Draw a square with 10 equal parts, equal columns. What decimal value does each column represent? They already have this on your paper for you. What does each of these columns represent? 1/10. Okay. Okay, so 0.1. Shade columns in the grid to represent the total distance to Charlene's school. The total distance to the school is 8/10 mile. How many columns will we shade? We're shading the distance to her school. How many?
15.
No. How many?
1, 8.
It says the distance from Charlene's house to her school is 8/10 mile. So we're going to shade 8 columns, right? That will be 8/10. So how many unshaded columns are you going to have out there?
2.
2.
So we do 8.
Yes, 8/10 to her house. So we're going to color in 8/10. All right, so we drew our 10 by 10 square on our grid, which took a while because usually that's a 10 by 10 grid, so we had to rearrange it. Then we filled in 8/10. So shade columns on the grid to represent the total distance to Charlene's school. The total distance to the school is 8/10. How many columns did you shade?
8.
8 columns. Divide the square into 10 equal rows, which is already done for you. What decimal value does each row represent? So what do each one of these
1/10 or 1/8.
rows represent? Not 1/8.
1/10.
1/10 again across. Okay?
Can we put that as a fraction? Or just that as a fraction?
No. As a decimal, they each represent 1/10. Using a different color, shade rows that overlap the shaded column to represent the distance to the school that Charlene rides on her bike. So how many of those are we going to color in a different color? How far did she ride her bike? 7/10. So color in. Now look, you're going to stop right there. And you're going to go down 7 of these. So it should look like something like that with 1 row empty at the bottom. So you're going to shade in 7 of those rows across that you had already shaded. What part of the distance to the school does Charlene ride her bike? 7/10. How many rows of the shaded columns did you shade? 7 rows. count the number of squares that you shaded twice. There are how many squares? If we're 8 by 7, what is 8 times 7?
56.
So there are 56 squares. Each square represents 1/100th, very good, of the mile. So 7/10 times 8/10 is 56 hundredths. No, nothing in the ones place but 56 hundredths. So Charlene rides her bike 0 and 56 hundredths. Okay, draw the conclusion at the top of 184. It asks you to explain how dividing the decimal squares into 10 equal columns and rows shows that tenths multiplied by tenths is equal to hundredths. So if we go back and look, we can see that we did 10 columns. We did 10 columns in our square, and then we did 10 rows. And so when we divided that into those smaller chunks, each one of those small squares is 1/100th. Now I'm going to give you the written explanation for that. So the columns and rows each represent tenths. The small squares created by the overlapping rows and columns show hundredths and represent the product of a tenth multiplied by a tenth. Okay, we talked about this the other day. Why is the part of the model representing the product less than either factor? Well, when we take both decimal factors are less than 1. So we had 0.8, right, times 0.7. And neither one of those equal 1. So I am finding a part of a part. The product will be less than 1 and less than both factors. Okay, now we're going to look at make the connection down about halfway down, page 184. It says you can use decimal squares to multiply decimals greater than 1. So the problem that they're giving us is 3/10 multiplied by 1 and 4/10. So it says shade columns to represent 1 and 4/10. So go ahead and take your pencil, and how are we going to shade this whole square, right? To represent 1. So go ahead and take your colored pencil and fill this in, 1 whole square. And how many columns are we going to fill in the other square? How many tenths do we need? More tenths do we need? 4. So go ahead and shade in those 4/10 in the other square. So how many tenths are in 1 and 4/10?
14.
14/10. Boy, they didn't really leave me enough room to write that. Okay, so 14/10. Step 2, shade rows that overlap the shaded columns to represent 3/10. How many rows of the shaded columns are we going to shade? How many? 3 rows. So take your colored pencil of the different color and do 3 rows.
In about 8 minutes.
Okay, so now you can see, as Faith asked a while ago, why in the other drawing was it dark? Well, I hadn't shaded underneath that green. So here's what it looks like now that I have shaded it, turned it black. So that's the piece, the black squares are the pieces you need. Those are the answer to your number sentence. Okay? So count the number of squares that you shaded twice. Record the product. First of all, this is 10 across here, right? Right here, this is 10. And how many rows of that did we shade? So what is 10 times 3? 30. So should you sit there and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? No. 30. Okay? So this is a 10 by 3 array. How many did we shade here? 4 by 3.
Which is 12.
So we had 30. We had 30 in this one, or
42.
30 hundredths, right?
And 12.
And 4 by 3, and 12 in this one. 12 hundredths in this one. So how many hundredths do we have if we add our hundredths?
42.
So we have 0 and 42 hundredths. This is number 1 on page 185, and I wanted to talk to you about the order in which you shade. Every time you shade, the second number in your number sentence should be what you shade up and down to give you your width, okay? The first number should be what you shade across. So we're going to shade across this 8 times. Okay? So the second number, this 7, is what we're going to shade up and down. And then the first number in the equation is what we're going to shade across. So how many hundredths did I shade here? In 8 tenths times 4 tenths. This is an array of 4 by 8. What is 4 times 8?
32.
And each one of these blocks represents, whoops, each one of these blocks represents hundredths, right? How about this one? I shaded a 7 by 1. What is 1 times 7?
7.
Now, it's hundredths though, so don't forget to fill that tenths place with the 0. Okay, this one is number, can anybody find it?
3.
3. Okay, so number 3 on page 185.
No,
So,
it's not. That's number 3. No.
Number 1 on there's number 3 on ours.
Yeah. That was
all right, in my Smartboard presentation, they have these kind of mixed up, so I just rewrote them. So we're going to go down, up and down. How many columns are we going to shade?
10.
On
4.
number 4.
4.
Oh.
4 columns, right? And how many rows across?
3.
Oops, I'm going to get my different color. 3. 1, 2, 3. So I have a 3 by 4 array, which is 12, and put your decimal in. Now on this one, we're going to shade that second number, right? We're going to shade it first. So we're going to shade this whole thing to represent our 1 of our 1 and 6 tenths, and then we're going to shade 6 of these. Then we're going to go back and we're going to shade 4 across. So we're going to shade our 4 across here. So in this box that we shaded everything, we have a 10 by what? 4 array, which is 40. Let's put that over here. And in this one, we shaded 4 by what?
5.
No.
6.
6.